So the JJK chapter 262 leaks are here, and although this was definitely a very exciting chapter, especially considering what happens at the very end, it is a very short one, and there's a reason for it. A pretty unfortunate reason actually, because an equally big piece of news came out along with this chapter, stating that Gege Akutami, the mangaka behind JJK, has fallen under some kind of illness, whether it's the flu or something else, we don't know, but this caused the chapter to be much shorter than it normally would be, with 262 sitting at around 7 pages. And on top of that, we're going to be going into a 2-week break so that Gege can rest up and be healthy for the next chapter. You're not going to get any complaints from me. Sure, it's a bummer that this chapter is shorter and we're going to be going into another break, but I mean, Gege's health definitely comes before anything else. I definitely hope that he gets the rest that he needs and gets healthy again. Honestly, I wouldn't even be upset if he took a whole month off, because if you're an experienced manga fan, then you know how brutal the manga industry can be for mangakas, many of them even dying from being overworked so much. So get healthy, Gege, we're all praying for you. But with that being said, let's get right into these leaks. The chapter begins with Sukuna and Yutaro talking about the fusion of Yuta and Gojo, obviously, opening their domains, and Yuta successfully manages to reduce the size of Unlimited Void's barrier to the size of a tiny basketball like Gojo did. So this is calling back to the original fight between Gojo and Sukuna, towards the beginning where they started having their domain clashes, and Gojo both expanded his domain greatly and compressed it to the size of a basketball. And as we're about to see, this was Gojo's key to defeating Sukuna's domain, seeing as how it was special with an open barrier. The narrator says that the solution that Gojo created for Sukuna's open barrier domain is to make a small barrier domain which can withstand the effects of Malevolent Shrine for approximately 3 minutes. And then we get a shot of both Sukuna and Yuta as they're using their domain expansions, and Yuta is thinking to himself, taking Sukuna's fatigue into consideration, it's possible for me to withstand his domain for 3 minutes, just like Gojo did. And then the narrator mentions, Sukuna has reduced effective curse technique range to just surround Yuta's barrier and eliminate Malevolent Shrine's 99-second time. So this is all pretty much saying that Sukuna outsmarted the rules yet again. Instead of just having a 1-minute time limit on his domain like he had previously, that time limit has been erased since the effective range is much smaller now. I mean, even when he's sick, Gege cannot stop giving Sukuna hacks. I'm not really complaining though, at this point it really doesn't matter. But moving on, we then find out something pretty crazy. Before the fight, Yuta had swapped souls with Gojo to train and improve his barrier techniques. So this was yet another pair that Ui had switched souls with, or had swapped their souls, which I think is a very important detail because it can explain away how Yuta is able to use Gojo's techniques so flawlessly right away. I mean, he can use his domain expansion from the jump. Yuta's a gifted sorcerer as we've seen throughout the series, but it still would have been tough to explain how he could have used all of his techniques so quickly, and this is a great way of explaining why. We then go back to the mental game, as Yuta thinks to himself, under 3 minutes I'll damage Sukuna enough to where he can't maintain Malevolent Shrine. And then Sukuna says, I'll destroy Infinite Void in under 3 minutes and expand my domain to finally kill everyone. Yuta then tries to pull Sukuna using blue, but Sukuna suddenly reduces the distance. Sukuna wraps his amputated arm to hold Yuta and lands a punch on his face. Yuta wonders how Sukuna managed to attack and realizes that alongside domain expansion, Sukuna is simultaneously using domain amplification in order to penetrate through infinity, which allowed him to land an attack on Yuta. Now, if I'm not mistaken, in Gojo and Sukuna's fight, Sukuna was able to do this to Gojo as well, using domain amplification to get through infinity, and Sukuna realizes how surprised that Yuta is to see this, so Sukuna gets this evil grin on his face as he thinks that the sorcerers can't share info about what's happening inside the domain through Mei's crows. So what I'm getting from this is that Sukuna is realizing here that all the little tricks he used on Gojo within their domain fight wasn't seen by anybody on the outside. So those tricks are still going to work a second time here in this fight. Sukuna might be grinning for a different reason, I'm not entirely sure, but that's what I took away from this. And then we cut away from the fight to something else, and it's probably the biggest surprise of this chapter and one that leaves me with the biggest questions. The scene switches as we see a fully manifested Rika crying and grieving, calling Yuta's name as she dearly holds his lifeless body. Now, this is a pretty brutal scene on its own. Like, Rika is literally holding the lifeless body of Yuta, the literal brainless body of Yuta. Like, you can literally pop the top of his head off right now and there's no brain in there. But it raises the obvious question, how is Rika still here if Yuta is already gone from his body? I mean, Yuta is still technically alive in Gojo's body, so that could explain why Rika is still alive here, but it definitely surprised me that she's fully manifested without any type of issues now that he's in a different body. Now, the reason why I think we're seeing this is because it gives us a path to kind of getting to the point where Yuta comes back, like he's able to swap back to his own body from Gojo, Gojo, because the big issue was even if Yuta could swap back into his body from Gojo's, his body was completely wrecked. So there's no way his body would have even survived if he managed to swap back. Maybe this is showing that Rika being alive and holding Yuta, she might be using her own cursed energy reserves to heal his body. And I'm assuming Rika's going to play an even bigger role at some point going forward, because the editor's comment at the end of the chapter says, Rika has fully manifested, but, and it kind of leaves off on that cliffhanger there. So again, I think this means that Rika's going to revive Yuta's body. I'm not really sure how that's going to play a role in all this. Maybe Yuta comes into the battlefield and sacrifices herself or something. I'm not entirely sure, but let me know what you guys think about this chapter in the comments below. Let's get some get well soons in the comments for Gege here. Let's try to manifest his health back so he can come back to making chapters, but of course only when he's fully healthy. That's it for this one though, guys. Have an absolutely wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, whatever, and I'll see you guys in the next video.